Welcome, good evening, Trinidad and Tobago, and a special hello to all our viewers and listeners joining from beyond our borders. Welcome to the consultation hosted by the recently appointed Cabinet Committee for the Review of the SEN Concordat, two enduring legacies of our educational system. The committee comprises 18 members who represent a wide range of educational stakeholders, including representatives from the University of the West Indies and the University of Trinidad and Tobago, national associations of public and assisted primary and secondary school principals, the National Parent Teachers Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, and the Interreligious Organization. I am Kwesi Atiba, one of the members of this committee and host of tonight's consultation. The committee is 21 and began its work in January 2022 with a mandate to complete its report in 9 months. That is by September 2022. To complete its review, the committee has been using a participatory evidence-based process. We have spoken with various national and international experts, explored theory and case studies, utilized extensive consultation data and empirical data, all to Tobago's educational system. This data has given us greater insight into the complexities of our education system and have shown us there is no simple single solution. Rather, addressing these challenges likely requires multiple approaches that consider the interrelatedness of the many issues. Our process allows us to carefully deliberate and weigh policy as best as possible. And at the end of tonight's program, some of these options will be shared. The committee values public engagement in this policy process. Every policy decision must consider every one of us and be made with care. We are engaging the public in two ways. First, with these live consultations and with a national poll on education and the SEA, online surveys available to adults and other for children. A sneak peek at the preliminary results will be shared in our final presentation. So that is definitely something to look forward to. We begin our conversation about partnerships and the critical role they play in transforming the education system. The presentations are split into two segments, each followed by a 25-minute question and answer sessions. Of course, those present via Zoom, those of you joining in on Facebook can utilize the comment section. You are also welcome to send your questions via WhatsApp at 776-0440. Don't worry if you didn't get the number. It will be posted on the screen for your convenience throughout the program. Today, I am joined by other committee members as well as critical education stakeholders to discuss the role of parents, school leaders, teachers, unions, and denominational bodies. However, we will take a quick break before we begin with our first three speakers, Ms. Zina Ramatali, Ms. Shara Carrington-James, and Ms. Antonia Tecker de Freitas. We'll be right back.
Mommy?
Yes?
I'm scared.
It's okay. Just keep your mask on and wash your hands as often as possible. Remember how we practice? It will be fun to be back in school. You learn about healthy eating habits, play games to stay fit, and you can even get a nutritious breakfast and lunch at lunchtime.
And we'll see you later when we meet with the school nurse to discuss healthy eating options.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
At this point, I take the privilege in turning the floor over to Ms. Zina Ramatali, the first Vice President of the National Parent Teachers Association and President of the St. George Regional National Parent-Teacher Association of Trinidad and Tobago to discuss the role of parents in achieving system change.
Thank you so much. Pleasant good evening to the moderator, Mr. Atiba, fellow panelists, and to all viewers and listeners of Trinidad and Tobago and the World Wide Web. I'm indeed grateful for the opportunity by the committee chairman, Professor Delisle, to represent the National PTA this evening and to present on this very important topic of parental involvement in achieving a system change. And indeed, please don't shoot the messenger. And we ask that we all have an open mind. And we hope that parents will all pay attention and all other stakeholders that we can join hands in achieving a system change. My topic this evening, as I indicated, the role of parents in achieving a system change. And indeed, parents are very important. And as I begin my presentation, let us look at some ways parents in Trinidad and Tobago can become more fully involved in schools following the Joyce-Epstein framework. And of course, Joyce-Epstein framework is not the only framework, because as a national association, we have been engaging in the local research, working with Professor June George, Dr. Marjorie Jameson, and others. We have partnered with Professor Diosaran and other professionals, Hanif Benjamin, in terms of engaging us in how we could become better parents in the education system. However, my objectives for this presentation this evening, first of all, we want to look at defining parental involvement. My objectives for this presentation, first of all, we want to look at defining parental involvement, roadblocks to parent involvement, 6 types of parental involvement, which we certainly want to recommend, and lastly, our recommendations. Now, our first step to improving parental involvement in Trinidad and Tobago, based on our research as a national association and working in the trenches, we ought to move away from bake and cake sales only. And I say only because there's a stereotype known where parents are only involved in schools to raise funds through bake and cake sales and barbecues and so forth. This is simply not the case. Parents can be involved in schools in many different ways to benefit the whole child, as highlighted by the Association for Curriculum Development, ASCD. And I know, of course, Ms. Doyle is listening this evening, who was very instrumental in the National PTA joining ASCD. The whole child can benefit from parental involvement once families advocate for their children's needs and support their children learning. Thus, bake and cake sales won't cut it, my dear stakeholders. Parents should not be only used as fundraising agents. Let us look at some key research findings. Schools that engage families in supporting their children's learning both at school and at home are linked to higher student achievement. And that is some of the research that we have been looking at. Also, we want to look at parents' education is not significantly correlated with parent involvement unless teacher practices are considered. Now, let us turn to defining parental involvement. The widely accepted framework known as the Joyce-Epstein framework has been a game changer in defining parental involvement. This framework can be used as a tool for parents, teachers, and the community for assisting in implementing comprehensive family-school partnerships. As Epstein stated in 2001, well-planned and well-implemented family and community involvement activities contribute to student achievement and school success. But what does the research say about parental involvement? As highlighted in the slide, the research is saying parent involvement plays an important role in improving student success in school. Parents often want to become more involved in their children's education, but are uncertain to do so. So let us look now at some roadblocks to parental involvement. And I have a couple here, and I would like to go through at least a few of them. One, lack of administrators' communication skills to work with parents. Please don't shoot the messenger. That's the word on the ground. Two, lack of teacher understanding of various cultures represented among families. Three, lack of parents' education and knowledge of school curriculum. So there are many parents who don't know what is expected of them from first year right up to secondary school. There are many parents who would say they didn't know their children had to submit an SBA. They don't know what is in the curriculum. So we ought to educate our parents where this is concerned. Parents are afraid to approach some teachers and administrators. That is a fact. Unreachable parents, and I want to say unreachable parents, parents changing their phone numbers. When the school call, the teacher call, you can't find parents because their phone numbers are constantly changing. We have how many percentage of single parents, low-income earners working long hours, employed parents who do not find the time and cannot, and will not, some parents, no fault of theirs, find the time to assist their children. We look at concerns about safety in the community after school hours, crime and violence, families with young children and those with special needs, grandparents raising children. There are many schools today, and we have a lot of stakeholders here this evening will attest. Anytime you call for parents, it's the grandparents that are coming to the schools now and are in PTA meetings. The cultural and socio-economic status, administrators' insensitivity to students' needs, teenage parents who are still developing themselves, whose brain is far from being developed, immigrant parents. We have a lot of immigrant parents in our country today, and they are not around. Some of those children are unattended, unsupervised, and are not in schools. Homeless families, and lack of parents' time. So these are some of the roadblocks that I think could be looked at. And also we have lack of transportation as a whole, right, in various communities. So these are some roadblocks to parental involvement. Then we would like to recommend, according to Joyce Epstein framework, these 6 types of parental involvement. Somebody called and they said, this wouldn't work in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, anything could work if we put our local spin to it. And the first one we want to change in this system is parenting. Parenting, communicating, volunteering, learning at home, decision-making, collaborating with the community. And when we say parenting, helping families with child rearing and parenting skills. We need parenting workshops that should become part of the school calendar of events, which will include parent skills, stages of child development and understanding changes in adolescence. There must be a link between school and home. So at this time, we have to look at parenting. And just yesterday, I came upon this piece of research and working with Dr. Melita St. Hill, school psychologist. And here's what Dr. St. Hill said. The school must provide parenting skill training and family counseling, realizing that dysfunctional families produce dysfunctional children who have behavioral problems, low academic performance, abuse, addictions, depression, anxiety, lack of self-esteem, low self-esteem, and other social skills difficulties. It is imperative that parents and teachers receive training and counseling individually and in groups in skills such as behavior management. Brain-based parent-teacher training includes understanding children's brain functioning and developmental stages, social and coping skills, communication skills, establishing boundaries and conflict resolutions, detection of special problems identified in these objectives, and basic counseling techniques. The school must play an integral part in developing the whole child that ensures that each child is healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged according to ASCD. And then we want to look at communicating. We want at this time to have developed, or we want to see developed, effective home to school and school to home communication must be designed and implemented. For example, the school must not only communicate with parents when children are misbehaving. Schools should be communicating with parents about their children's progress on a regular basis. How many parents can say that the school only call them when their children are misbehaving? Other than that, you do not hear from the school. When parents receive frequent, effective communication from the school, their involvement increases. Parents' overall evaluation of educators improve, and their attitude towards school are more positive. So we need to look at some areas here. Connect family engagement to student learning. We need parents to understand school policy. We have to have that understanding of school policies, attendance, behavior, and rules. Attend parent-teacher conferences throughout the year to ensure that you're on the same page with the school administrators and teachers. Regular schedule notices, memos, phone calls, newsletters, WhatsApp messages, and emails, and other forms of communications. Schools should offer courses or programs and activities within the school, giving clear information about school policies, programs, or reforms, and at this present time, having virtual seminars. I would just like to conclude by looking at some recommendations. Of course, we will be able to look at the other areas in terms of volunteering, learning at home, and so forth. Now, let's look at the benefits of parental involvement. Parental involvement leads to reduced absenteeism. Research shows that parental involvement encourages children to attend school regularly, improves student behavior. Parental behavior involvement promotes better student behavior, boosts the student's self-esteem, and improvement in their attitude towards school, the ability for the child to build and maintain healthy relationship with their peers and teachers, reduce inappropriate classroom behavior such as bullying and fighting, increase student achievement, improve parent-teacher satisfaction, increase understanding of their child's emotional and intellectual needs, parents' understanding of their child's emotional and intellectual needs better, increase parents' understanding of their child's developmental stages and how to use positive reinforcement at each stage, increase acceptance of parents in schools, increase confidence of parents in parenting capabilities. Now, some of the recommendations quickly. 1, welcome parents into the school. We want all parents to feel welcome. Educate parents on the school system. There are parents who don't know. They had bad experiences in school, so they don't know. They don't like the school. They don't like some of what is going on. So we need to educate them on that. Parents must understand what is expected from them from first year to tertiary education. Arrange homeschool visit. Establish a parent room in every school. Share information about adult learning opportunities and parenting classes. Parent workshops and seminars in every school on stages of child development and adolescence. Encourage parents to join the PTA. And we must say that here, join the PTA and affiliate it to the national PTA if possible. Parent empowerment campaign, training for administrators and teachers. They often feel threatened by parents. Many of them feel threatened. Therefore, administrators, please don't feel threatened by parents anymore. Therefore, we need an open forum that could be established so that the relationship can be built among parent and teachers. Sessions on parenting at health centers, prenatal clinics, and community centers. Specially designed programs on TV, social media to assist parents. Partnership with the Ministry of Education. Partnering with the corporate and business sector. Establishing reading camps for parents and students, and establishing of a National Parenting Commission. And in closing, I want to leave the words of Professor Diosaran taken from his research on indiscipline and violence in school, 2004. And he says, what is a healthy student? A healthy student is one who feels safe and comfortable, is civic-minded, disciplined, and achievement-oriented, possesses strong spiritual and moral values, enjoys free treatment and diverse opportunities, has a sense of trust, and is supported and encouraged by caring teachers, parents, and communities. I thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Ramatali. Very, very interesting, pointing out recommendations, although last, but pointing out roadblocks, which are very, very serious issues in terms of learning for children and that parental involvement. The question of higher achievement where parents participate, so important. And finally telling teachers, don't be scared of the parents, which is important also. So we move forward, and I will now invite the second speaker, Ms. Shara Carrington James, President of the Association of Principals and Public Secondary Schools, to talk about the role of school leaders in ensuring sustainable change at the school level. Ms. James is coming from Tobago, so we are dealing with an online presentation coming from Tobago.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Tiba. I haven't come yet. I'm still in Tobago, but I'm beaming in from Tobago. So thank you very much for having me and for the contribution and my participation on the panel. The question is today, in the limited time that we have, where does the principalship in primary and secondary schools fit into a discussion on SEA? For us in the principalship, it is an opportunity for linkages and seamless efficacy. I think my presentation today will take a quick look at the principalship agenda and situations that are defined by the tiered system that exists in Trinidad and Tobago. I ask this question, is this all about the government? Is it all about the government? And I'm just going to quickly share my slide. Change. Is it about the government? No, it's about change. I ask this because our consultation in 2020 and the last week's presentations on June the 9th gave us a reality check. Our students are in crisis and a nation is in crisis at the crossroads in the history of education. Or is it really schooling? There has been no other generation of such unprecedented communicative technology. Everything that they do is amplified and exacerbated. Every issue is magnified. Is the SEA exam the cause of the problems that we see? The problems that were mentioned in our consultation of 2020? Is the Concordat the issue? Is the transitionary process the issue? Having participated in the process to the end, our input on this committee would allow for a taking off of implementation, we hope, for transformation and change. Role of the principal. Look at the gears and the wheels of transformation of that butterfly, that if we disaggregate them, speak to community, students, the Ministry of Education, principals, parents. Let me just go back. All right, so I'm having a little difficulty there because technology is technology, but we are showing the integrated role of the principalship. Our input to stimulate discussion tonight is hinged on one particular graphic, and it's a graphic that's adapted from a framework by Parrott and Dudge of 2020, turning high poverty schools into high performing schools. And anybody in leadership in the principalship knows that the gears and wheels that must turn are very much integrated, interconnected, and very complex, if I may dare say. The dependency of the issues and the context that must turn in a synergistic direction, and I hasten to say, not the same direction. So if my gears of the principalship follow that arrow, then it says in that clockwise movement, the students are moving in an anti-clockwise but synergistic movement to ensure that at the end of the day, the stakeholder engagement that allows for transformation can occur. We see ourselves in the principalship as interconnected, complex, but yet dynamic. What does the data say about leadership? It is second only to teaching in school-related factors and its impact on student learning. So when you look at the impact on students, the leadership of a school is second only to that interface in the classroom. The factors that influence students' achievement, 27 of the top 30 are school, teacher, and curriculum based, all of which are influenced by the principalship. So if you had any doubt in terms of where the principalship stands in our input on this SEA and Transformational Committee, it stands here in the literature and in the evidence. So, interconnectedness. It means that in all those gears and wheels, we have parental involvement that matters. And the data says that it stands at 33% of all the variances that impact a child's life. 33% of it comes from parent involvement, home environment, socioeconomic status, mental health, post-pandemic stress and resilience I've put in there, special needs, diagnostic pathways, all of that connected to the home environment and the child. Where does school fall relative to parent involvement? Believe it or not, Marzano speaks about 70% and teacher quality 13%. So if the principalship is arguably the most influential position in education by Hallie P, Tetal, all of them talking about the framework for development of leadership, then we as the change agents must have that interconnected gearing motion with our teachers because we are all interdependent in our vision for transformation and ensuring that those children who gave their input in the 2020 consultation understand that we've heard them. The principalship does not diminish, however, the impact of the legions of professional teachers whose lives daily influence what is going on in the classroom. If indeed that is the case, then leadership matters, the principalship matters. The vice principalship therefore matters according to Reeves. In Trinidad and Tobago, therefore, there's a little concern that we have that we throw in here for consideration. The percentage of appointed principals to position needs some attention. The positional leadership is important to the effecting of the role of leadership of any principal. It's just one aspect, but it is in no way insignificant to the rather necessary and it's rather necessary and impactful. What does the data really look like in the context of our principalship? This is what it looks like. No district, Caroni, Need, Port of Spain and Environment Educational District, we're all below what the collective average is. And certainly none of us gross or come close to 100. Some woefully, just more than the 30% that who's in SEA. So when we talk about children who at 30% are underperforming, I'm saying if this role of leadership is so critical, then across Trinidad and Tobago and our districts, those are the appointed principals that you would see. But we have a critical role to play. And if we are so important and invested in transformation and ensuring that our students, always I come back to the students, then what are our roles? They are formal ones: visionary shaper, instructional leader, financial strategist, curriculum adjuster, and it is as complex as the gears indicate that they are. Policy implementers, and we look forward to that. Informal roles as well beset us, because we are caregivers and financiers and counselors, first aiders. We are disciplinarians on the right and adjusters of adjudicators, cheerleaders, chauffeurs, and motivators. All of this is embodied in the role of the principalship, integrating with that of the teachers and of our parents. For us to be effective, there's a certain amount of presence or tenure. We have in our schools in Trinidad and Tobago people who are acting, deans who are acting as VP and find themselves acting as principals. Well, if this role is so important and impactful and how we're going to transform, welcome, and create an environment for effectiveness, we must look at the people involved in the process, the plant, and the processes as well. Some of the elements I've highlighted: questioning and critiquing what goes on in our schools and the culture that exists, the systematic inequities. We need to confront those structures as leaders. The high expectations that we actually have in our schools inform the culture. There must be robustness and democracy. So that's point 3. I skipped down to 7 because resources are absolutely critical. They must be financial, timely, decentralized to facilitate procurement, and we must not at any time leave out the human resource that can care for our children. Do we do it alone? I go to 8. We need the MOE, tutor, CARICOM, UNESCO, UNICEF, all of them, the churches, the boards, the parents, so that our children can be safe at night. Somewhere in there, our effectiveness cannot be registered without recognizing that there are voices. There are voices that came from our students in 2020. 80% of the students in our network of schools want the SEA to remain. That was an APS collected data. Education system does not cater to their vocational needs. There is somehow a perception that that job that they're looking for, our education system is not catering for it. The subjects offered, they claim they're not interested in. What about those who have special needs? They're not seeing it. The subjects are not aligned to their future goals. The teachers feel that the children leaving the primary schools are not prepared, but the system says you must move on. For primary school students to secondary school, the transition is mandatory. Lack of authenticity and transparency in the process, again, coming out in the data. Parents want to see the equity, want to see the excellence. And at the end, we look at the data. The PISA studies in science suggest that in Trinidad and Tobago, we have the highest below average with the least resilience. We're low and we can't recover. That is disturbing and it cries out for help. In our categorizations of schools, traditional, the modern, secondary, new sector, and private schools, all of us as leaders in those schools must be cognizant of the voices that are speaking to us and be responsive as well. How do we facilitate these partnerships? Nothing that I've spoken to there in being effective can indeed be executed, successful, if there is not accountability. There must be a systemic rigor. And that is what we want to see in the principalship. We want to see coming from the Ministry of Education all the way down to the classroom, systemic rigor in assessment, mapping, teaching and learning. And we actually feel that we are at a position where we can, I know that I have a tutor colleague to follow me, the hiring and firing. We have to look at the practices and put in there the accountability systems so that the decisions that are made closest to the child are the ones that are most effective. We need the autonomy to make sure that whatever is going on here is not centralized. There's curriculum adaptation, contextual procurement. Innovation can only happen if we have that autonomy, and the sustainability is only effective when there is communication, training, mentorship, and succession planning. All of this we look forward to sharing in the new and transformative SEA model that will embrace all of our schools and shape the next generation. I conclude in my little 10 minutes that somewhere in there, the interconnectedness for support, the leadership that we need, that we are prepared to effect in our schools with tenure and with the vision that embraces all of those psychosocial needs of our children, or climate, or culture in our schools. Once the evidence for innovation and action is present and we have the resources that filters down to us all, then successful and sustainable, differentiated, inclusive transformation is ours. We are ready, we are prepared to move. And at this time, I would say to you, let us then start the wheels turning of movement across our secondary and primary school leadership, because we're ready. I thank you. Here starts our journey.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carrington James. And let me just take one little issue out of what you said. Principal leadership matters. Principal leadership matters. That says so much in terms of what we want to do going forward. And once again, remind our viewers that your questions and comments are welcome via Zoom chat and question and answer, the Facebook live stream comment section, and WhatsApp contact number 776-0440. And you can also go ahead and click that link for the National Poll on Education and the SEA. We'll be opening the floor in about the next 10 minutes for a question time. And now we invite Ms. Antonia Tika de Freitas, to discuss the role of teachers in moving an education system forward. And why I stopped there is because she's putting on her teacher's hat at this point in time, and she will put on the union hat a little bit later. So, Ms. de Freitas, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening to you. Good evening, fellow panelists. And good evening to audience in Trinidad and Tobago and around the world. We have heard quite a bit so far about transformation. And within any transformation in any system, in our education system in particular, we must have teachers. I would want us to consider that there needs to be, first of all, a paradigm shift, a shift in how we look at the persons who operate within the education sector. The OECD reminds us that, the best performing school system will provide a high quality of education for every student, because you want every student to benefit from excellent teaching. But I dare say the first thing we have to do when we must consider quality education is look at a sound national philosophy for education, be it Vision 2020 or the National Development Strategy 2030. Whatever philosophical iteration a government of the day determines is relevant, that philosophy of education should incorporate the principles, goals, policies, and education practices of the country's education system. To expand on that, in other words, when I stand in my classroom as a teacher, I must be able to know, or to be able to call upon, rather, the teacher's aide to come and assist me deal with the child in my classroom who has a developmental or a special need. I must be able to call as a teacher on the school nurse. We were wondering where the school nurses were a while ago. On the school nurse to come and assist me as a teacher with a child who has a medical emergency. When we start to look at the different categories of education professionals within the education system, we realize that it's not just the teachers have to move the education system forward, but a whole larger category of workers in the education sector. Additionally, when I stand as a teacher in my classroom, I would want to know that what I am doing for curriculum delivery is based on a philosophy that will promote inclusion, equity, and human capital development for all citizens, bar none. It means, therefore, I must have targeted and decisive allocation of resources to me in my classroom, to our schools, to our school leaders, and even to the environment within which the schools operate. When we hear or we talk about the education sector in Trinidad and Tobago receiving the largest budgetary allocation, you also have to consider how that budgetary allocation is disbursed throughout the different levels of the education sector, from ECCE all the way to tertiary and inclusive of special education. And that budgetary allocation should not just consider building a school or fixing a school. It should consider training and development. It should consider maintenance. The budgetary allocation should consider me as a classroom. What do I need to perform my job? How is my job to be measured? What are the standards that we will use to measure student performance? What research and what data will that be based on? Too often, in many countries, we have research and data done by professionals, and then it sits on a shelf. We talk about it, we have a consultation, and it sits on a shelf gathering dust because the will to enact and the resources to enact as part of a bigger national philosophy of education don't exist. So as a teacher in a classroom, I want to be able to say, this is how I feel something should go in an education system. We are looking at the matter of SCA and transitioning the student from the primary school to the secondary school. And this is not a discussion current, this has been going on for years. We recognize the secondary entrance assessment, formerly the common entrance, is very stressful, high stakes assessment. But how are we going to have the resources as teachers in schools to assist our students with the transition if we don't have a specific plan for that human resource development, for training and development of educators, for looking at innovations and recognizing research and data collection by educators, for having workshops and professional development segments, for using technology adequately to deliver the curriculum to children with diverse needs. If I could just backtrack to the national philosophy, many times when we talk about special education, we only focus on the students with special needs. But you know what? And I'm sure my two colleagues doing sign language will agree. We forget gifted children. We forget children who operate at the upper bars of the education system. Albert Einstein was diagnosed as what? Dyslexic, but he was called dumb. Because he was gifted and there was no way for them to utilize the talent that he had whilst he was in the mainstream classroom. As a teacher, I want to know that the training and development given to me, I want to know that the standards are set for me and for measurement of my curriculum delivery. As a teacher, I want to know that what I do in the benefit of my students to enhance their performance will contribute to national development. So how can the education professionals move the system forward? That human resource development plan must focus on recruitment and selection, as was mentioned by the previous speaker. There is a comment that many educators find distasteful. Those who can do, those who can't teach. Can you believe that? So in other words, the only thing I can do if I can't find nothing else to do is to teach. But here we are talking about, on a consistent basis at a national level, transformation in the education system. We have to change that mindset. And we have to make sure then that we go out on specific recruitment drives and select the best and the brightest minds to be education professionals. Of course, that human resource development plan that a teacher would want to see must also ensure appropriate tenure of service and compensation, as well as job functions. I cannot and should not be asked to be a teacher, an education professional, to move a system forward when I also have to be a doctor, lawyer, nurse, judge, and all of those other functions. The school system must have additional support staff, must have additional criteria and matrices such as the sound discipline matrix to assist me in my job in terms of boosting student performance. The human resource development plan, therefore, would also focus on my training and accreditation. It must be consistent. Professional development of me as a teacher must be consistent. I must be able to stay current with education initiatives if the state is saying this is what we want to propose to deal with student performance, they must provide me with the training and the accreditation to assist my students and to support the system as a whole. So when we talk about colleagues and friends, education professionals, and I'm using new terminology now because we have a mindset that we must change. When we talk about the role of education professionals in moving an education system forward, at the end of the day, the reality is we have to look at how we are going to value the educators, and we have to look at what we want them to do exactly. What are the procedures we want them to follow? What are the curricula we want them to follow to treat with the diversity of needs in schools? And we must equip them accordingly. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tika de Freitas. Your contribution addressed national philosophy on education. And that is big. That is huge. Now, we said that we will be going into some questions. We remind you to share your opinions about education and the SEA in the national poll available online for both adults and children. The link will be shared during the break. If you don't get it, don't worry. Our chat facilitators are sharing the link, and you can also check the ministry's Facebook page. Before we ask the panel to respond to your questions and invite a few live questions, let us take a short break.
Mommy,
Yes?
I'm scared.
It's okay. Just keep your mask on and wash your hands as often as possible. Remember how we practice? It will be fun to be back in school. You learn about healthy eating habits, play games to stay fit, and you can even get a nutritious breakfast and lunch at lunchtime.
And we'll see you later when we meet with the school nurse to discuss healthy eating options.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
Hey T, what's up?
I had a post day today.
You saw drama today?
Nah, tomorrow. Today was visual arts.
My mom had to come into school this afternoon.
Your mom?
Yes, we had a workshop with our school nurse on healthcare and eating properly.
Oh yeah, mom and dad came in yesterday for a workshop on how to manage anxiety and stress.
I wonder if they could help us with the stress of this mask.
And the PA sister only reminding me, students wash all their hands.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
Okay, now we are going into our question period, and a question for Ms. Ramatali from WhatsApp. What role can parents play towards achieving system change?
Well, as indicated before, parents must get involved. The opportunity now, it is not long ago where you just wanted, or parents were just called into the school to raise funds. This is an opportunity for parents to know what is being taught in the classroom, to build that relationship with your teacher. It is important for us to know a little about what our children are being taught in the classroom. How, for instance, Ms. Tika de Freitas spoke about not understand when you are placed in schools. What are the performance, how your children have been performing from first year to standard 4. Some parents only know about school, about what is going on when they come to sign up for the children to write the SEA exam. So the time has come for parents to be involved in every aspect of your children's lives and for you to be an equal partner in the decision making in the schools. So in order for this system to change is understanding what role a parent can play in changing the system. And you have to be involved in the school, not outside of the school. There's a part for you in your children's lives. They put it in a nutshell.
Okay, thanks very much. And question for Ms. Carrington James from Facebook. What role can school leaders play in ensuring sustainable change at the school level? Okay, while we wait on Ms. Carrington James, for Ms. De Freitas from Facebook, there are strong traditional teaching practices in our schools. What should teaching and learning look like in this reformed system?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for the question. Fully established in the pedagogy and have stood the test of time. However, there is contemporary thinking that we would refer to as 21st century teaching and learning, because you would want to develop the 21st century child and the 21st century learner. We are looking now at the development of new skills such as pedagogy now has to move in the direction where we not only train the children or help the children to utilize the technology wisely, but we help them to cope in a global society. If we recall, those traditional practices, not all of them obtained or existed when we had globalization on such a scale. So that as we move into this new paradigm of the 21st century learner, our practices must be child-centered as opposed to teacher-centered. In other words, the teacher must now not be the sage on the stage, but more the guide on the side. And so, whilst we understand that there are some practices that have worked for many of us whilst we were in school, when we look at the type of child we have now, the environment, the local and global skills and approaches that we must utilize. I hope that answers the question.
And to Ms. Carrington James, what role can school leaders play in ensuring sustainable change at the school level?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. My apologies, but the technology is not perfect. At the school level, for school principals to engage in sustainable change, our philosophy is always that we can't do it alone. A principal, if you see the responsibilities of a principal in this particular paradigm, it's not something that you can do alone. To have that sustainability, we need continuity, we need support, we need to have the agencies resource our schools, we need alternatives, we need, at the end of the day, parents to be involved in the process. These are all children. These are the country's children, the world's children. And they would respond to our parents and so on if they see that there is interest, if they see that there is that kind of a high expectation for achievement. So I see us as principals having that sustaining role in transformation if we are able to coordinate that network of stakeholders with efficacy. Everybody doing their little part to ensure that this thing is sustainable. And one principal leaves, then another steps in because that culture of achievement has been passed on. It's really like a little manual with support from all the stakeholders.
Okay, thanks. And back to Ms. De Freitas from Facebook. How should collaboration be fostered to ensure effective teaching, learning, and teacher development?
Thank you again for the question. Collaboration would suggest that there is a willingness by the parties involved to engage particular objectives and to fulfill particular outcomes. If you want to foster, could you just repeat the last question, please, Mr. Atiba? The last part of the question?
How should collaboration be fostered to ensure effective teaching, learning, and teacher development?
Right. Working backwards, if we're looking at teacher development in the first instance, those curricula and those programs with the national philosophy, as I said earlier, as well as particular standards. For example, what obtains within the region right now is a set of standards called the CARICOM teaching standards that allow education, teacher development institutions around the region to establish standards for teacher development. When we look at collaboration in that context, it could be at the macros, and that will trickle down into what transpires in the different institutions in the different territories. When you are looking at collaboration for effective teaching and learning, as Ms. Carrington James and Ms. Ramatali said, it's about partnerships. Partnership between the teacher in the classroom, whichever other support staff are on the compound, the administrator, and the parent. Regular communication in that most significant component for effective teaching and learning is reaching the child. And so when we talk about the collaboration to reach the child, everything must center around having that student achieve his or her maximum potential. If it means having 5 parent-teacher conferences, Ms. Ramatali, then we will do that. If it means doing that as a different learning style, then we will do that. If it means having a special place for the children to operate at the ECCE level because of their needs, we will do that. But we can't do it alone in isolation, and therefore the collaboration must be both internal in the school and external with the partners in society and in the education sector.
Regarding increasing parental engagement, and how can we overcome these?
I think one of the biggest fear is that, please forgive me, Ms. Shara Carrington, James, and Ms. Sticker the Freitas. But some of the big issues we encountered is that the lack of relationship between the parents and school administrators, some teachers. Them parents, I don't want them parents in my school. They feel they could teach and they want to come and take over my school. We have to move away from that. It is about a collaboration. It is about relationship. It's about allowing the parents to enter into the school and to be able to engage them in meaningful discussions as to how we can work together in the interest of this child. So that is important to build that relationship. I'm a product of that. Mr. Ned, he outlined early what he expected of us as parents. And he called us in and he said, look, this is my plan, and I would like the support from the parents. I'll be teaching this. For instance, he gave us a whole list of what he will be teaching for Standard 5 for which term, and he indicated how he wanted us to work with our children at home. And that caused me to left school. And, it's because of that relationship and that support and educating me in all the aspects of teaching and learning that my children are very successful today. And I could share those success stories and what transpired in the school, right? So that we can have parents on it. Don't be afraid. And teachers must have a little patience because parents are not perfect. All families are not the same. Know the districts, know where parents come from. Parents must be welcome in the school, and no administrator should say, I don't want a PTA because them parents like to come and take over our schools. That I don't want to hear anymore, hoping that we could work as equal partners in the interest and welfare of the children of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you. We want to remind our audience that we are addressing 2 major issues, one having to do with the SEA, the other having to do with the Concord. There's an open question. What type of support is given to principals in the schools where most of their students are scoring under 30%? Or 30% and under? What kind of support? And I think the teachers will have to address that.
I will give way to Miss Carrington James, and if necessary, I will comment after.
Given existing?
Is given to principals in
Alright.
schools where most of their students are scoring 30% and under.
So I'll speak to the question in the tense in which it is asked. What support is given? The Ministry of Education has been, I'll be honest, very disjointed in how it has supported such schools. And this is why I'm speaking to autonomy and decision-making closer to the child. If you send, as in some of our schools, 66% of our children who have scored under 50% and maybe 33% who have scored under 30, and it varies across the board. We should have the option of looking to see how we meet the needs of those children. The ministry has not been as supportive in terms of remedial classes. There's stars, there's steps that come out in the vacation and so on, but it's not enough. So to answer what is, there are district leader teams that come through the schools that are at risk with intervention programs. But if you look at the number of students, then the intervention has to go beyond that. And maybe at the secondary school is not the place for the intervention to happen. And then we need some seamless some seamless intervention even from the home. Ms. Ramatali, this is not intended for you to respond to, but even from the home where we start to look at, and I hope that there will come a day when we look at parenting in a different way, maybe even get into licensing. By the time someone makes a decision to have a child accident, however it happens, that some agency stepped in. That's a whole social program that allows that child to be nourished properly, to be monitored, to be screened, to be supported all the way through to primary school, reading, diagnostics, real support. Don't wait until they get to the secondary school. And that's why I ask about the TENS. So as of now, there are stars, there are steps, there are intervention programs, there are no remedial instructors in some of our schools, but we need it. Hopefully, with this transformative process, there's a change. Maybe we won't even, and I'm going here, I'm not going to take too much longer, but if we change the kinds of offerings at our schools, and don't try to remediate or fix the children, but try to fix the schools to meet the needs of the children, and maybe we'll get in a different direction and the conversation will change.
Stay with us, Ms. Carrington James, because this last question is for you. What strategies can a school leader employ to balance their desire to be innovative and the need to remain accountable to their key stakeholder?
What can we do to balance the desire? That's not a desire, that's a mandate. As a mandate. We cannot live in this particular 21st century where we're talking about fourth and fifth industrial revolution and technology having shown us through the pandemic its value, its necessity, and talk about desire. For me, that is a mandate. It has to happen. And the retrograde steps that come at the end of this pandemic are woefully painful because we have not resourced our schools in a way to embrace all the advances that we've done online. So, stick to the question, what that desire, it's a mandate. And what can we do therefore? We have to ensure that at the end of the day, we at the school level get all of us involved in this thing about addressing the needs of our children. And I'm going to end with this, Mr. Atiba, because you say it's the last one. All of our children do not belong in a grammar school. We must cater for their vocational needs, not shunt them off, but cater to their needs, to their programming, their skills. We must just look at our school model. Finland doesn't have this. Children go to school and they pick up the guitar, they want to play guitar and so on. Today, there's a program for taking them through guitar playing and learning their language and doing the math of how many strings, but their passion is there. In China, the gymnasts and so on, they go into an academy from very early, but they're more literate than we are. And so we have to look at our school models and how we sustain the innovative element is a mandate.
Okay, thanks. And Ms. Tika de Freitas wants to get a piece of that question.
No, well, if you open this up tonight, you know what is going to happen.
Indeed, because the response by Miss Carrington James, where she used that critical word, intervention. Intervention is key, and early intervention is critical. As the committee members sat and deliberated on the mandate that we gave to look at transitioning from the SCA to something else, we recognize, as Ms. Carrington James said, it's not to fix the secondary school. The issues have to be addressed in the primary schools, and maybe even earlier than that. And then the corollary is to deal with whatever psychosocial or socio-economic situation that the child or children would face. So I'm putting that on the table, Mr. Moderator and audience, to say it's not just something that will remain within the education ministry or within the education sector if we want this transformation to take place. It has to involve other key stakeholders and agencies within Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Carrington James referenced to, when we look at how the economy of Germany was built, the school system, the secondary school system, there was a significant focus and significant allocation of physical, material, and financial resources to technical vocational subjects. We talk technical vocational education here. Are we serious? When we look at the condition of our labs, the fact that there are no workshop attendants, when we look at the fact that our students are going to do the CVQ examinations in some instances, and they are not properly prepared because they don't have what they need. They have to buy their own material. Or, as we will hear from other panelists, some schools want to do the CVQ, but they don't have the facilities. We cannot be talking transformation and intervention and development if we don't consider the macro picture and put away all of the other bits of noise that will cloud appropriate policy development. Thank you.
Well, we have another last question. Okay, and it's for Ms. Tika de Freitas.
So it's coming, it's coming to you. Mr. Moderator, could I interject?
Go ahead.
And so remember you said it's the last question. There's just something here on the chat, and I just want to make a statement that accountability and autonomy are not mutually exclusive. Accountability can be systemic and still afford autonomy. It must. It's not a runaway horse. So I'm seeing the chat and I'm saying I am not speaking to irresponsible acts. I'm talking about autonomy that is built into a system, but still autonomy that's decentralized from somebody sitting in Trinidad and deciding that a child who goes to Speyside High School should not or should. That's what I'm talking about, but they're systems and structures.
Okay.
Yeah? Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So for the last, from Ms. Tika de Freitas, what roles do teachers play in pushing the education system forward into the future?
One of the critical things the educators would have to do would be to become familiar with what a new education system would look like. But they can only do that if there is a philosophy, if there are guiding principles, as I mentioned earlier. Good? So that the teacher will function in the classroom in the context within which the state determines they want the particular curriculum or the particular areas of the curriculum or the particular reform implemented. That's one. The implementation now process will fall squarely within the lap of the school administrator and the teacher. And therefore, the teacher has to be made aware of all that is required for implementation. To move the education system forward, our education professionals, inclusive of our teachers, must also themselves have a philosophy, a personal philosophy for education and for how they interact with students and what they want their charges to be. And that too will help them move the education system forward. Finally, as Ms. Carrington James said, the issue of accountability, how we measure and how we account for what we are supposed to do in terms of measurement of our performance and measurement of the student performance, those are things that will help strengthen our education sector.
Okay, we will now go to our break. I want to thank the three panelists very, very much for that kind of input, for those contributions. And as we go forward this evening, we expect other kinds of contributions from our other panelists. So thank you very much. We will now switch to a break.
Mommy,
Yes?
I'm scared.
It's okay. Just keep your mask on and wash your hands as often as possible. Remember how we practice? It will be fun to be back in school. You learn about healthy eating habits, play games to stay fit, and you can even get a nutritious breakfast and lunch at lunchtime.
And we'll see you later when we meet with the school nurse to discuss healthy eating options.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
Hey T, what's up?
I had a post day today.
You start drama today?
Nah, tomorrow. Today was visual arts.
My mom had to come into school this afternoon.
Your mom?
Yes, we had a workshop with our school nurse on healthcare and eating properly.
Oh yeah, mom and dad came in yesterday for a workshop on how to manage anxiety and stress.
I wonder if they could help us with the stress of this mask.
And the PA sister only reminding me, students wash all their hands.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
Okay, good evening again to all our audience, wherever they are in Trinidad and Tobago and any place in the world. We move on to some discussions again with another group, although we still have Ms. Tika de Freitas with us with her union hat this time. She is the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teaching with the denominational boards, starting with Ms. Sharon Mangru, Chief Executive Officer of the Catholic Education Board of Management and Chair of the Association of Denominational Boards of Education, Imam Imtiaz Ali as JAR representative on the Interreligious Organization, and the Right Reverend Joy Abdul Mu, Trinidad and Tobago. So we will begin with Ms. Antonia Teka de Freitas with her union hat.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening again to the viewing audience in Trinidad and Tobago and around the world. Go to one item at the bottom of the last slide that speaks to education professionals, which we identified as the new terminology with the new mindset. If education professionals are to be part of that change in systems and performance enhancement, then there must be a change in how we deal with the representative organizations, in how we deal with education unions. Education unions around the world, inclusive of Trinidad and Tobago, are members of a global body called Education International. And not only do we, in the first instance, pay attention to the issues of teacher remuneration, compensation, and working conditions, etc., but we are also charged with the mandate to ensure the delivery of quality public education being a common good for all citizens of a country. And if we go back to what was mentioned earlier about a national philosophy for education, unions around the world, unions of education professionals around the world, would always seek to ensure that what is being delivered to students at all levels in the different classrooms will facilitate excellent teaching and allow the students to maximize their truest potential. What is the role of education unions in terms of education reform and the development and implementation of education initiatives? Basically, when we consider the issue of collaboration, there are many persons who say tutor in our national context only making noise. However, unlike other jurisdictions, there is a relationship prescribed by law within the Education Act of Trinidad and Tobago, Section 74E of the Education Act, that mandates the Minister of Education to engage the representative union for educators in discussion on matters affecting the educators as well as matters affecting education and the curriculum. That means, therefore, that any initiative that the Ministry of Education locally wants to implement, they must discuss. We're not talking about getting permission. We are talking about discussing all of the issues. The union will represent the views and the feelings, the perceptions, the opinions of the members in the classrooms. Those must be taken into consideration, especially when we're looking about the implementation of a reform. In Guyana, for example, at this time, there is discussion at the national level, consultation at the national level, on the development of the technical vocational sector in that country. The Guyana Teachers Union has a key role to play in that consultation. And they have indicated to me, as I did my anecdotal data collection, that both in the consultation stage and in the implementation stage of the whatever plan is developed, they will have a critical role to play. In St. Lucia, for example, we have such consultations going on in terms of other education reforms. When UNESCO sends funding to a territory, the mandate given to the government is to include stakeholders, which would also mean that the unions, the education unions, are part of the discussion as well. So as we look towards the transitioning away from SCA, hopefully, and into something that will be more equitable and less stressful for 11 plus students, one of the things we have to pay attention to as the union is how that transition will affect what our members do and how they deliver the curriculum. Mention was made in a previous segment of the program about the models of schools, and that's something this committee has deliberated upon. We have to look, therefore, as to how the terms and conditions of educators will be impacted upon by the various models proposed and make the necessary recommendations, be it to legislation or to what is negotiated with the CPO. It doesn't always have to be confrontational. It doesn't always have to be a conflict. Tutor in the past within Trinidad and Tobago has had many meaningful collaborations with the state in terms of having certain reforms and initiatives implemented. Those of us who have been in the system for a long time, the SEMP initiative, for example, where funding was given for particular types of schools, and how we look at measuring and assessing the work of teachers, evaluating their performance. That is something that the union and the Ministry of Education are collaborating on at this time. Now, people may feel and people may say that tutor only encourages people to do the wrong thing. And nothing is further from the truth. As a responsible organization, late coming and other such behaviors that are not appropriate, those are not things we can condone. So when we look at collaboration and consultation, it's not simply in a local context supposed to be a token measure. There is a requirement under the law for that to take place, and tutor will always advocate for the state, for the Ministry of Education, privileged to have been part of this committee and to have contributed and shared the views of educators to the work of this committee and towards the development of a national policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President of Tutor. Evaluating performance, that to me is a very, very big one. Move on to a discussion on the denominational board as partners. And we have, as was said before, Ms. Sharon Mangru, and Imam Imtiaz Ali, and Reverend Joy Abdul Mohan. And it's a joint presentation between Imam Imtiaz Ali and Reverend Joy Mohan. So we will begin with the Chief Executive Officer of the Catholic Board of Management.
Evening, viewers and listeners. It is a great pleasure to participate in this consultation. The question that I am addressing is what is required by the state and denominational boards in order to redefine a genuine partnership between both parties. But why is a partnership necessary at all? The simple answer is that denominational boards own some of the schools in the state. Just as you may have saved up money for years to be able to buy your house and own it, in the same way, the members of the various denominational bodies have contributed to the ownership of the properties that are the schools. On the other hand, the Minister of Education is charged with the responsibility of finding sufficient spaces to educate the children of the nation. And so these two, holding hands together, can provide for the children. There are some other considerations. The Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago provides for freedom of conscience and religious belief and observance for all people of Trinidad and Tobago. This means that the parent of a child who is going to school has a right to choose the school that will support the parent's values and belief system. And to do this, to allow for this, the state needs to provide a variety of schools so that the parent can choose. You can't choose if there's only one type. There must be a variety to choose from. There's also the right to the enjoyment of property, the property that is owned by the boards. But in order to enjoy property, you must be able to enjoy the property for the purpose that it was intended. All of the denominational bodies establish their schools for particular purposes. An example, the Catholic Church established schools definitely for a particular purpose. And this slide gives a little insight. It's a lot, but basically what it's saying is that the mission entrusted to the Catholic Church is the holistic development of every student for responsible citizenship. And that might be public education, but the difference here, motivated by the spirit of the gospel and modeled on the example of Jesus Christ. Every denominational body has a purpose for establishing their schools. Public funding to protect parental right to choose a school consistent with their values is not something that happens only in Trinidad and Tobago. There are many other jurisdictions in which this is given effect. So in Guatemala, for example, just there in South America, there is a relationship between the FAE Alegria Education Foundation and the Ministry of Education, so that students going to the schools are paid for by the Ministry of Education. In Guatemala, in Panama, there is a tax deduction that is available. In the Netherlands, private schools, regardless of persuasion, they may not be religious particularly, but private, are paid for by the government. In the United States, we know a lot about what happens in the United States. There are tax deductions and there are other allowances that allow for parents to educate their children in private schools so that the education can be consistent with the parents' beliefs and values. Just remembering that the members of these denominational boards, the people who choose to have their children go to those schools, are public citizens and they pay taxes, and so they are entitled to public education. So what does the present partnership look like? The Ministry of Education is responsible for providing school spaces for young citizens. They provide the funding for new construction after school buildings have been used and used and used. Time to do new construction, they provide it. They do major repairs. They provide salaries for staff and the benefits. They are responsible for developing curriculum through all the stages, design all the way up to evaluation and including preparation of teachers for delivering the curriculum. The boards, on the other hand, own the land, the buildings. They provide day-to-day maintenance. All the board schools provide some sort of facilities improvement in addition to the agreement and the arrangement with the Ministry of Education. They make recommendations for appointments of staff. They implement the curriculum in keeping with their particular beliefs and value systems. They provide a measure of teacher professional development, lots of student support, and very much parental support. So for example, as the pandemic started, the board schools were first off the bat in providing devices for students, in providing connectivity. Many of the schools provided hampers so that they could support the parents of those children in needs. And I think we all know about the schools in which, on the highway, for instance, there's a school that recently came up with a swimming pool. That isn't provided by the Ministry of Education, and so that can provide for an expanded curriculum. Whole science labs and so on are provided by the boards. What are the barriers to this partnership? Generally, there is a demonstration of a lack of respect for the board schools, for the values, the fact that they own the properties, the values and the principles. Poor communication between the Ministry of Education and the boards. Very often the communication is one way, and often we see it in public media. There's an unsatisfactory level of meaningful consultation, and there is superficial engagement in decision making. What would a genuine partnership look like? Well, there are certain requirements. There must be a formal agreement between the partners that recognize the interest of each of the partners. That's if it's to be a genuine partnership. And the agreement must be observed by all the members of the organization, captain to cook. So it cannot be that the Minister of Education signs an agreement, but the clerks in the ministry each make and implement their own policy. The benefits have to be shared. And what is the benefit? For us, it is the children of the nation. It is nation building. The purpose has to be clear and it must be shared. And that is the development of the young people of Trinidad and Tobago to achieve their fullest potential. And there must be a recognition of the mutual neutrality of the business. And that is that what happens to one partner affects the other. It affects the work of the other. And so we have to hold hands to work together. So what are we asking to facilitate a genuine partnership? It sounds easy. Mutual respect for each partner's purpose for being. What is the purpose for establishing the schools? Whatever we do, we need to recognize that purpose and work towards its fulfillment. What is the purpose of the Ministry of Education providing education? The boards need to work toward that purpose. Open, regular, and honest communication. And I dare say that could start with the phone system in the Ministry of Education, which is really designed to send people crazy. Cooperation and collaboration. And we're talking partnership between the Ministry of Education and the boards. But this cooperation, collaboration is across the board. It is for all the partners, all of us who work together to produce the citizens of our country. And for us in the boards, it is citizens not only for Trinidad and Tobago, citizens of the world, and citizens for the afterlife. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. May the peace, blessings, mercy, and forgiveness of the Lord of all the worlds descend upon us all. Dear listeners, dear audience, I have been asked to speak a little bit about the history of the denominational boards in Trinidad and Tobago. The time that the first denominational or the first secondary school in Trinidad and Tobago was established in 1856 by the Catholic Church. And we have progressed a long way since then. After the uprising or the protests in the oil fields in 1937, the then colonial government appointed the West Indian Commission, which was also known as the Moyne Commission. The head of that commission was Lord Moyne, who had served before in India, and he recommended at that time that both Muslims and Hindus be given the opportunity to establish primary schools, just as the Christian boards or the Christian churches had that privilege at that time. So the first non-Christian denominational school that was established was in 1948 in San Juan, El Socorro, San Juan, by the TIA. It was a Muslim school in Bicester Street, San Juan. Soon afterwards, the Mahasabha and the Astra got involved in education, and we had our primary schools that persons of other religious denominations could attend. In 1960, an agreement was signed by the then Father Pedro Valdez and Mr. John Donaldson, who was the Minister of Education. It was called the Concordat. This was an agreement. The government wanted to expand secondary education in Trinidad, and they sought the help of the religious bodies. The government sought the help of religious bodies because prior to that, secondary education was only offered by paid private secondary schools, and some of them were religious and some of them were not religious schools. And the government sought the help of the religious bodies and signed the Concordat to include more places in the system. Of course, prior to that, the government also had Queen's Royal College, and they had St. George's College around that time. So the government wanted to expand the secondary system, and they got the help, and there was an agreement. So the secondary school system expanded. Since that time, the Muslim boards got involved, and the Hindu boards got involved. So in the 1960s, we had the Astra Boys College and the Astra Girls College in San Fernando. Subsequent to that, then you had the Lakshmi Girls High School in St. Augustine. And that was the beginning of secondary education for non-Christian groups in Trinidad and Tobago. And this partnership has worked very, very well. And Mrs. Mangru gave some of the pointers of why it worked very well. And I will tell you, as a former secretary of a board, we put our heart and soul into make sure our schools succeed. And I think that is reason enough. I will now pass you on to my colleague, Reverend Joy Abdul Mohan, to continue on this topic.
Thank you very much, Imam Imtiaz, my colleague from the IRO. And later on, another colleague will share some more on the denominational boards as partners, esteemed Pandit Navin Maharaj. Thank you, Imam, for setting the stage from a historical perspective in relation to the denominational boards as partners. And I think that was a good indication of how we move forward as partners with the state. And yes, Ms. Mangru made some very, very salient points, and I think we'll have some overlapping, but emphasis is such an important issue when we deal with issues such as the denominational boards as partners. Nevertheless, it is important to state that in preparing this very short presentation, 3 to 5 minutes, 3 more than 5, we as the interreligious organization representatives on this particular committee found it necessary to have dialogue with our school boards, primary and secondary. And I want to state from the onset that denominational boards of education have always been major stakeholders in the education system of Trinidad and Tobago. And over the years, and especially since the signing of the Concordat, the role of denominational boards in the education system has significantly evolved and vastly grown. It is evident, and I think it's safe to say, that denominational schools are the schools of choice for most parents and guardians, both at primary and secondary schools. And having said that, I want to identify a few points as to why denominational schools are the schools of choice, and also the role that denominational boards play. And first of all, and I want to say that Ms. Mangru articulated this very well, denominational boards are providers of human and physical resources. Educators from the denominational schools have contributed significantly to the development of curriculum materials and even curriculum reform. In addition, the denominational boards have provided educational opportunities for thousands of children each year and have seen excellent results in the fields of academics, sports, culture, and various other genres. And if we were to really focus on how the denominational boards play an integral role in property, the maintenance of property, despite the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding in 2008, whereby government assumed full responsibility for repairs and renovations and the rebuilding of denominational schools, the denominational boards have contributed millions of dollars to upkeep and maintain their properties and their schools. So the subvention from the state cannot suffice. Much more resources are needed, especially financial. So the schools work very hard to raise funds to provide for students and, of course, the maintenance of the schools. And I believe that the partnership became a lived reality during the pandemic and at the beginning of the pandemic. And why I say this is that the effects of the global pandemic on education were real and perhaps devastating to some. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, the denominational boards worked hand in hand with the Ministry of Education and by extension the state and other stakeholders to ensure that all schools functioned and provided online learning opportunities for all students and also for teachers, because the teachers who had internet challenges and so on, the schools really worked hard to ensure that even teachers were provided with the necessary resources and equipment. So, you know, the denominational boards worked assiduously with the state to develop guidelines and systems to deal with the issues of the global pandemic and its effects on the education system, albeit challenging. We made it through. And I want to state publicly, I salute all educators, especially during this pandemic, and how our teachers really labored sacrificially to ensure that our students got quality education. The next point I want to make is that the denominational boards must be respected as active partners and not silent partners. Emphatically, I want to say that again, that the denominational boards are not silent partners, but respected and active partners who play a meaningful and integral role in the education system, as was mentioned before by many of the previous speakers. And therefore, the denominational boards must not feel as if the partnership is a transactional relationship or an ATM partnership, so to speak, but one that is meaningful, enriching, and one that is transformative. And as I come to the end, I share with Ms. Mangru some redefinition of a more genuine partnership. And I want to suggest the following considerations. One common agenda and goal. Effective partnership takes true commitment and willingness to build long-term and genuine relationships with one goal in mind. Quality education is the only agenda. In 1960, when the Concordat was signed, the state and the denominational institutions agreed to collaborate in the provision of education to all citizens, with the understanding that the character of denominational schools will be maintained. But always the goal was and still is quality education for all. And I think I heard Ms. Tika de Freitas make that point of quality education, breaking down barriers of creed and race. And therefore, that is very important. When we redefine a more genuine partnership, always have one common agenda or goal. The second consideration has to do with building authentic and trusting relationship through critical initiatives to meet critical needs. And all denominational schools treat each student as special and human. And they don't see them as a Christian or Hindu or Muslim, but as a human and as a child and a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. We are not going to get anywhere without building authentic and trusting relationships. The state and denominational boards will build credibility and integrity by developing critical initiatives to meet critical needs. And that's why the next point, it runs right into the next point, to cultivate a network of champions for education. I think there's too much suspicion when funding is provided by the corporate world. The state and denominational boards can cultivate a network of champions for education by encouraging reputable companies from the corporate world to invest in education. And this, I believe, will help to build more investment and support for the partnership. The next point has to do with the religious and spiritual influence on education. A plus and not a minus. No pun intended for the educators. But the religious and spiritual influence on education is a plus and not a minus. And we are not talking about indoctrination. Just the other day, I'm talking to a doctor who lived in Rio Claro and who went to a denominational school in San Fernando, and if he did not have that opportunity, he said, and regardless of his religion, he learned so much from that particular school, which I will not name. The issue of the relationship between church and state in education will always present some challenges in a multi-religious and pluralistic society. However, it is evident that the denominational schools, through holistic and values education, have produced well-rounded citizens. Be that as it may, I'm not saying or inferring here that the denominational schools are perfect. By no means, no. We have our challenges. It's how we deal with them through holistic and values education. And in conclusion, albeit the Constitution remains a living document, the constitutional right of a parent or guardian to provide a school of his or her choice for education of his or her child is enshrined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and that right must be preserved and protected. In fact, if the consensus of opinion is that parents choose to send their children to denominational schools for the various considerations and reasons discussed, and if denominational schools are efficiently operated by administrators, then the state may need to consider giving the denominational boards more schools as a pilot project to use the approach that the denominational boards may use to perhaps change the perception of state schools. I think this will widen the base of choice for parents and strengthen the partnership among schools, parents, guardians, and the Ministry of Education. And so, friends, the partnership between denominational boards and the state is an important one, most needed, especially in these uncertain times. So there must be that shared praxis approach when we develop and redefine this relationship. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that our listeners, our viewers, wherever they are, would have learned quite a number of things from these presentations, especially the question of the expansion of the secondary education and on goal. We now have to take a break. We just want to remind our viewers that your questions and comments are welcome on Zoom, Facebook, WhatsApp, number 776-0440. We have two more discussions to go after this short break.
Mommy?
Yes?
I'm scared.
It's okay. Just keep your mask on and wash your hands as often as possible. Remember how we practice? It will be fun to be back in school. You learn about healthy eating habits, play games to stay fit, and you can even get a nutritious breakfast and lunch at lunchtime.
And we'll see you later when we meet with the school nurse to discuss healthy eating options.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
Hey T, what's up?
I had a post day today.
You start drama today?
Nah, tomorrow. Today was visual arts.
My mom had to come into school this afternoon.
Your mom?
Yes, we had a workshop with our school nurse on healthcare and eating properly.
Oh yeah, mom and dad came in yesterday for a workshop on how to manage anxiety and stress.
I wonder if they could help us with the stress of this mask.
And the PA sister only reminding me, students wash all their hands.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
Yes. We continue our conversation again on partnerships. That is the theme for today's presentations. And we want to discuss denominational schools in the system. We are going to have our presenters, Ms. Sonia Mahesh Prasad, the president of the Association of Principals of Assisted School, Navin Maharaj, Public Relations Officer of the IRO, and acting principal of Vishnu Boys College. So it's to you now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tiba, and a pleasant evening. Good evening to our listeners and viewers and to members of the panel. It is a pleasure to address you all on, denominational schools and value added as far as the denominational schools in our education system is concerned. I will just be looking at how denominational schools as a whole add to the education offered to our students, and how do we add value as school leaders within denominational schools. Now, my colleagues did speak very eloquently about the historical context governing denominational schools, and they would have alluded to some of the points that I'm going to discuss briefly in my presentation as well. One of the first things that I would like to emphasize in terms of value and denominational schools is that question of school culture, school climate, the ethos of a school, and how is that unique in a denominational context. And if we had to look at a definition of school culture, which I feel in a nutshell summarizes the strengths that we offer in denominational school, we're looking at Fullan, and it talks about school culture can be defined as a guiding beliefs and values evident in the way a school operates. School culture can be used to encompass the attitudes, expected behaviors, values that impact on how a school operates. And that is very important if I am now to go further and elaborate a bit on what exactly happens within our schools. But before I do that, I just want to make it very clear. I think there's a misconception that, the wider public may have, that the schools under denominational boards, they are monolithic and they all have similar backgrounds and experiences, and that is not so. They have existed for a very long time. The Imam recently, just now, alluded to the oldest school in the system being from the Roman Catholic denominational tradition, and that is very much so. But that is just one example. So we have a school as old as 186 years old, and then we have schools that are 22 years old and that are evolving under denominational boards. We have various backgrounds, various, church that control various religious bodies. So we have the Anglican, Roman Catholic, Presbyterian, Asja, Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha, Swaha, Pentecostal, Seventh-day Adventist, Baptists, to name a few. There are urban, there are rural schools as well under denominational boards and everything in between. We have single sex, we have co-ed schools as well. We have schools with a K program, and then we have schools without a K program. We have different size population, very small schools, some 500 and under, and then some, a few above 1,000. And our students come from various socioeconomic backgrounds. We have in many schools students who come from working class background, and sometimes there's this misconception that only students of a particular socioeconomic bracket attend denominational school, and that is very much not so. So we need to understand then the value and what we do in our schools against that sort of context. If I were to look at the norms and traditions and values that obtain at our schools, one of the things that we talk about a lot now is discipline. And the Ministry of Education, recently, sent out a revised disciplinary matrix. And we are looking at the issue of how do we inculcate a culture of discipline in our schools. And our strength as far as this is concerned, and I think one of the hallmark of denominational schools and something that I think a lot of parents gravitate towards is the discipline. They want a school where their children feel safe, where they feel safe at the end of the day when they drop their children off and their children travel to school, that there are structures and there are systems in place that ensure the safety, not just the physical, but the emotional safety of their children. Our disciplinary matrix have been, shaped over time, but they're all based on our strong religious framework, which feeds into the respect that is demonstrated within our compounds, our zero tolerance for certain types of behavior, our expectation that we treat one another in a certain way. Doesn't matter, teachers, students, teaching staff, non-teaching staff. Those things are reinforced in our assemblies. We start our days with prayers. There are several prayers during the course of the day. We end our day with prayers as well. And there's a certain level of peace, a certain expectation that you behave in a certain way. And as I said, it is reinforced in our religious instruction, the morals that we inculcate and that we try to mirror, and in the general conduct of our schools. Parental involvement, and a lot has been said about that, and we could not have done what we are doing without strong parental networking in our schools. We rely on our parents for assistance, for support. We partner with them, and we have long established relationship with our parents' body, not just for fundraising, but I will say that we have to rely as well for that because we are underfunded in many respects. But parental involvement, beyond that, we partner. During the pandemic, there was a lot of partnership between the homes and the schools, providing support in terms of even hampers, providing support in terms of trying to get devices, guiding parents on how to support their children while they are online. So we get to know our parents very, very well. And it's a standing joke, amongst a lot of us, is that we know our parents. In fact, sometimes we try to have our parent their children, Our schools are communities that are like a home type community as well. And community partnerships, very important because our schools are located in various communities, and those communities are part of our feeder schools, and then we have children from outside that immediate community. But we rely on that networking to provide resources, to provide assistance, not just physical resources, not just funding, but also to have personnel come in who could share best practice in certain areas. And we have that networking in our schools. We do have a high level of expectation in our denominational schools. A lot is expected of us. I think it's an area, as a principal, I will tell you, and my colleagues will attest to that a lot is expected from administrators, middle management, and teachers in these schools. That when our children come in and they perform at a certain level, the expectation is after 5 years, after 7 years, that we must add value to our students. And that expectation is part of the tradition of our school that I think guarantee that hard work and that dedication that we have within the staff of our schools. There's a high level of shared visioning and succession planning, and it comes under that auspices of the board, and the boards communicate their expectation, they provide the support, they look at issues, teachers, I know Mr. Stika de Freitas is here with the union perspective, and they're also very much instrumental in looking at teachers with late coming or teachers with other disciplinary issues. There's that backup that is provided for us as principals and as administrators, that we have that support and make sure that our teachers perform at a certain level. My last point before I hand over to my colleague is to talk about school-based management as a model that is practiced in denominational schools even before school-based management became something. We have a level of autonomy, which I feel all school principals should have, in that, for example, a merit list for teachers who are recruited into our schools principals and boards meet with these teachers from the merit list. They get an opportunity to look at best fit for the context of the school and the needs of the school and the vision of the school before teachers are selected. And I think that is something that is very important for the entire education system, that level of autonomy that we have in our schools and how we manage and ensure that our staff, teaching and non-teaching, janitorial, security, that, we have a say on the best fit. So with those few points, I want to hand over to my colleague, Pandit Navin Maharaj, who will conclude this presentation. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ms. Mahes, and good afternoon to our moderator, our listeners, and viewers. Just to summarize all that has been said by my colleagues on the denominational boards, we continue to align ourselves with the Ministry of Education. We have always and continue to work with the ministry in fulfilling the mandate of the ministry, as has been highlighted by one of my colleagues. And at the end of the day, we are in the business of education. We are stakeholders. We are here to provide for the nation's children, and we align ourselves with the goals and the mandate of all stakeholders to ensure that that happens. In our national schools also face many challenges, funding, as has been mentioned before, infrastructure, all of these, but we have managed to pool our resources together, and we have managed to, of course, to move the process of education forward. So this evening, it is our pleasure to be able to sit and, of course, be part of this. And the national schools have been continuously adding value-added education and moving our students from point A to point B. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that expression. Two things I would just want to point out. Discipline. That question of discipline. And coming out of the question of discipline, the second thing, zero tolerance for certain behavior. I don't want to see more. So much of that issue, the other side of it, in recent days. We have had a lot of discussion, and we want to remind our viewers that your questions and comments are still welcome via Zoom, Facebook, and WhatsApp 776-0440. And having gone through issues being raised, and now so now we want to welcome to the floor to treat with policy options our Professor Jerome Delisle, the chairman of the cabinet appointed committee, to give a glimpse at the policy options. So I'll open the floor now for our chairman.
This has been, that's a lovely voice. This has been a difficult 3 or 4 days. We've been trying to pull things together. I think you have an idea what we're dealing with in terms of putting the Netherlands. They actually have a philosophy of what they call, I can't pronounce it Dutch, but pillarization. So they understand how to kind of pull things together. So that is the strategy that we're using in trying to form things. So bearing that in mind, let's look at some of the policy options now. You'll get a glimpse of it. So we want to also tell you that some infographics may depend upon approval of the ministry, and that will include most of the data, but it wouldn't give you just the data alone. It'll explain and give you the policy options so you can put things together in pieces. If it doesn't come before, it's going to come in the report, and if you see the report, you're going to see it at the end, because that's a part of our story, telling the story through pictures. Things are going fine with the poll. I see that you're up with me at night and you're filling in polls. That's like very weird, but that's okay. Keep on doing it. Please take the poll, and kids, the adults have overtaken you 3-1. So they have 1,500 and you are just 500. So I need the kids to take the polls. You are very important, and we will accommodate all that you have said. I just want to share briefly the results, which I can't see, but I can tell you that I can tell you what. I don't know what I can tell you. Apparently, if I remember, that's okay. I'm just being sarcastic. You don't really like the sea, and you want to see the sea removed now. And I understand. I feel for you. And we would make sure that our story can say why or why not or what actually that we're doing. And I hope that's fine for now. So in terms of the Concordat, again, we looked at that. There's a general agreement that we know what the Concordat is. It's not as negative as because some people do have strong views on the Concordat, but it's not as negative as it should be. Now there, but the adults will have about maybe 10 areas. So you're filling out these areas and we're looking at it, and it will help us with our argumentation to explain. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, all that you said here, we do listen to. Like when you talk, when someone asks last week, well, last session, about again the Concordat, we realized that maybe we need to get someone from one of those societies like Belgium. Many of the philosophical schools that promote religious education, they're in a secular society. They have quite clear understandings of church and state. We're still in negotiation with that person to let them talk to our committee, a really excellent professor. And so we're looking forward to have that. So that what that feeds into is our understanding of the process moving forward. Okay, so how did we make decisions? Now, we said that the goals were excellence, equity, well-being, and we actually have chosen criteria. We voted on that. As you will see, justice, well-being, equity, fairness, and excellence. And again, I'll respond to that question last week about fairness. What the committee has been informed in terms of our expert speakers is that fairness is very complex, and that you need to look at the philosophical perspectives. As a measurement person, in fact, we are very interested in fairness, and in fact, the current standards for educational measurement and testing do include a separate chapter on fairness. So it guides us, but it's not what we consider fair, because there are different conceptions of fairness. You can't say Nozick has a view, that's one of the philosophers, and that's correct, and other people were wrong. So you have to look and see and understand why people have different understandings of fairness. But that leads us to the 3 areas that we have policy options for at this point in time. I hope no other areas come up. That's the C options, whether we're going to have the C or not. Sounds like COVID. C or not. The Concordat options, and then we have the C award options, which was taken up late. The minister didn't ask us, but we did take it up. And you'll have seen those questions in your poll as well, which was done way before. Now, the poll is made from the 2020 consultations. We actually read through and synthesized all of the statements, and we then constructed it. And finally, when we make decisions, we look at risks, consequences, and trade-offs. So you might find that the decision is obvious. I don't want to tell you this joke, you wouldn't even like it. Well, you could decide, it's a horrible joke, I shouldn't even say it. Whatever you do in life, you have to think of the consequences. There are consequences in whatever you do. All right? You just can't make it and say, all right, I'm going to do it. And then you do it, and then say, I should not do it. Okay? So that's what we're doing. And we actually have a way in policy work. We have what we call a consequences matrix. And in fact, we do have consequences matrix for everything. So let's move on. Oh, no, I know I should have got it down because I really can't see. So I'm trying to, I had to send this to the, but I've been sending too much communications to people. I think I'm seeing it now. Nope. Okay. Oh, yes, I'm seeing it bigger now. So here are the first set of policy options for removing the C. We don't have any option which says that it should remain as is, because we know you wouldn't have liked that, and you agree in the poll. You say don't do that, don't do that. There is we designed something called an incremental, progressive pathway to radical change. In other words, this is another bad joke I was going to say. If you want to do something that drastic, you don't just do it so. I can't even go out. The illustration that's coming back to me. You start off slowly, and you make people comfortable, and you correct what is the particular problem, and that is what the EPP stands for. So that's the first one. Now, the second one deals with zoning, and thank you again. And you will see that there, and you will see both the benefits and the disadvantages of zoning. Now, know that it might not change segregation, which I kind of realize that you recognize as well, because we read the work of Professor Michael, and we do understand that, and the way Trinidad communities are, it is separated, it is separated over small pieces. The variance of the options, as I told you last week, consists of either looking at the traditional 3 to 6 mile catchment area or looking at the entire district, idea which you saw in the US. And we may also have to redraw the regions, but that's way beyond us. That will require GIS and getting the continuous sampling data. Okay, I'm getting it. Thank you so much. Wow. Let's hope the computer doesn't shut down. All kinds of things happen, all right? Thank you so much. Now, there's something called a voucher. Now, I know some people are angry. Let me tell you the story, because I've been reading this story because I'm hoping to be able to travel to go and listen to it in January. Now, Chile does both. Chile does both options, right? Now, they have instituted choice before America. Everybody, they had choice, and they had something called vouchers. Now, a voucher allows you to buy your way into a school. When they tried that under the Pinochet government, it completely stretched the system out, and you had a high level of inequity. So vouchers is something you will hear about vouchers in the U.S. Some groups do encourage it. We consider that it allows greater choice, because once you have a voucher, you can go anywhere you want, but it does result in inequity. Is choice a good thing then? If you look at the system, and by the way, we have handbooks on choice, right? We actually have a journal of school choice. People don't know that, right? Is choice a good thing? And that's written in your Constitution 4F. It could have been written because other societies had choice written before, based on religious things. Ireland had a choice in 18-something, they wrote it in. Okay? I can't answer. But it leads to inequity. It leads to inequity. All right? Because once you have choice, and we can see it in New Zealand, which had choice, stopped choice, start back choice again, whatever, it leads inequity. So you have to manage inequity. All right? This is not the first system that has experienced that. And forget, close the mind off when you see the US. Where you see US people say, choice, 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 charter schools. Well, you know already that the US have their problems with inequity, and people telling you that, just telling you that because of a political philosophy. You have to manage the inequity. It's kind of hard. I think you believe me, right? I don't think I lie as yet. So we transfer the low performing government schools to the national schools. That's a problem. But remember the transfer the right. Remember the national schools do have the primary school system, and that primary school system that Trinidad have horrible. And it's all not coming from the 140 government schools. So I don't know if it will work. Maybe prayer works in secondary school, it doesn't work in primary school. I don't know, but it ain't working down there at all. Well, you can regret. The Barbados option, I hope my colleagues are already like my IRO people. The delayed assessment, that is one of the recommendations that seems to work very well. The evidence from Sweden and Germany is that delaying the assessment, delaying the tracking to 14 works. I'm not saying that our system wouldn't work better. I'm just saying that it works. Full stop. Continuous assessment. I know people still love that. You have to think about that. And we have both the Caribbean, the CXC, the CPA, as well as the narrative profile. Both attempt to do formative assessment, and we are saying that why not just do formative assessment as encouraged by USAID to Africa. So those are the options. Let's look at the C award options now. Leave as is, leave all. We have the 200, increase the number of awards, 500, 1,000, that's it, right? Award option 3, decrease the number of awards for high achievers. One of the issues we had was reducing the ties, and we could use a different sort of measurement to reduce ties, because you can actually work out which is the better performer based on the difficulty of the question. We call that RASH methodology. Remove all awards, redistribute or mix the award profile. What we normally do once we discuss the issue and we actually vote, and I'm ashamed and afraid here to say that the committee hasn't seen this as yet, but you're going to see it before them. This is their current voting, and you can see quite clearly that they are talking about maybe redistributing, or if not, removing. So the committee is very strong in terms of understanding the issues. People have their views, but they're able to know what's best for the system. And that's why I thoroughly trust this committee. It seems to be a difficult committee, but the Prime Minister set it up. It's actually a perfect committee, because at the end of the day, people vote by conscience. All right? So I can tell you that I can understand everything that they vote for. And so when I write the policy argumentation, I can actually understand what people are saying. Now, sometimes when we have difficult decisions, a member asks that, we actually do more than this. We actually show how the decisions are graded. And you'll see that in the report if you ever see the report, because it's going on long and long. And Concordat, whoa, ticklish. All right, we do have a do nothing thing here. And we have a number of ways. Actually, the Concordat can work for us, because one of the issues you saw was the resilience thing, and we can see we can actually reduce the resilience issue by making sure that our students who have difficulties economically and socially get a chance. So you will see some options like that. Because we deal with large data, and I was hoping that the CEO come here, because he has learned to deal with large scale data as well, and some of the methodologies like multi-level modeling. Sometimes you think that a lot of poor children are getting into a school, but when you look at the large data, I remember I have a colleague, and he came from America, and he said, "Well, you see, look at me. I'm very poor, and I went to St. Mary's." Yeah, but how much people see like you. Look around. You know, you're going to think, see, you look like me? You look like me? Well, if they look like you, it means it's only 2 or 3. Get in. So people have to understand that and don't make up things. The colleague hearing that is, so I'm in trouble tomorrow. Um, so we created this thing called a consequences matrix, and we will look at all the 10 different areas, and we actually graded it. As you will see, the delay tracking works well, but the 8 policy pathways, the incremental approach. Now, so it's called progressive incremental change for radical reform, and it extends itself. We can look at some details of it, you'll see it more if you ever get the report. It focuses upon visioning, governance, and assessment reform. Governance is key. And as I listen to my colleagues, I can see the 2 countries now. I never understood what they were doing in terms of the Netherlands, but they have very strong ministries, very expert ministries as well, as well as a testing company, CITO, and they manage the education system. Similarly with Singapore. So the governance has to be stronger. We need to have a school evaluation system for everybody. We need to have school improvement for the schools that are low tier, and we're getting the students. Because it's not low performing. People sometimes misinterpret the words, sometimes for me actually. I saw a whole thesis on low performing schools. They're not low performing schools, they're low tier, because you put the students who are low performing from the SCA, and you put them there and tell them, well, here, right? So you're low performing, but you're blaming them for what? All right? So the low tier schools, we would want to work with them. And the new funding protocols, there's a lot of advice on that. We're moving faster. There's a theory of change. We hope that the system, there are 8 inputs to the system. It doesn't talk about continuous assessment, I'm sorry to say, Miss Freitas. So it does talk about a balanced assessment system. So you do have formative assessment, and you do have public exams, and you do have monitoring assessments. Could the new 11 plus design include a type of continuous assessment? Yes, but they will have to test it first, and you have 6 years for that. So test it, make sure it's working, because performance assessments, and that's one of my strengths. Performance assessments on the measurement side don't necessarily help children who are poor, right? Because to make a portfolio, I have to take with 10 minutes, with 5 minutes, 5 minutes. 3 more minutes. You know that because think of what a portfolio is, right? If I carry that home now, and my mother is an engineer and my father is a lawyer, I say, Daddy, so tell me, I come in, let me show you. And then, where mommy working still? But I have this for tomorrow. So you immediately realize that extended assessments don't necessarily negate inequity. All right. They tell me to wrap up. The idea of the EPP then is to reduce the difference in the schools, and eventually we hope to have basically 2 types of schools: traditional and modern, because we will have improved the modern. That'll be nice. Looking forward to the day when we see Tenapuna Sec is one of the outstanding schools in St. George's. I'm not saying that, but I'll fix it up good. But also the Semper New Sector schools have an advantage because we have a very strong technical sector with MIC and National Energy Skills and the CVQs to have a strong sector. They still need to have basic academic education, but they also have the advantage of the CVQs. So you don't want no mechanic who can read, right? You're not going to... Yeah, plan to carry no car there, right? Because if you load on one car and then the government say hybrid, you say hybrid? What's that? And then you say electric. You say, well, I done. Right? I go in and sell. Okay. I'm almost finished. We just make jokes all the time. Yeah. It's phased. So we started now. It ends in 2025, and then 2028 we can look at the effects of it and decide we can't take this thing no more. Children stress, the dying, we need to remove it. And you should have had that effect of the decreased inequity that we see the problem. Very fundamental. The primary school must improve. And the 10 steps are very clear. Early interventions, I love how, I think, again, Antonia talked about that. Not remediation. Don't wait till the child come 11, 12, 13, 14 and say, can we remediate you? You still want to stay in school? Start early. All right? Early interventions, monitor performance, accountability, monitoring, benchmarks and targets. So people have to reach benchmarks. Turnaround academy. We have a board-specific academy. So we're not saying all the boards themselves also have, the government will have the turnaround academy, but they will have board-specific programs. So some boards have schools in challenging areas. How does the program adapt itself to help those specific boards? Formative assessment, implement a literacy portfolio, and they're even going so fast. All right. So wait. Let me slow down because I'm going to end. I'm getting breathless. I reached it. Trinidad has great potential. I love this picture of the two kids praying. All right. We're praying for improvement now. It's a caution and an opportunity. It has great potential, a fantastic system that can be the best, not in the Caribbean, but in Latin America. So work together, work with us. We will have different views. We will get there as we position ourselves. So this is the big picture, and we are hoping. I love this Nigerian proverb. Now, you will have heard it in, you would have heard that proverb. No, they don't want to switch again. I don't like. You will have heard a version of the proverb in Black Panther. That's not the real proverb. The proverb has two meanings. In the moment of crisis, the wise build bridges and the foolish build dams. Now, the dam, as in the Black Panther proverb, could be a barrier, but think of what a dam is. All right? You spend all the time building the dam. 20 years to build a dam. And all you need to do was put two pieces of wood and make a bridge. So don't look for no big thing to change the system and then expend all the energies. Look for solving it piece by piece, quickly, incrementally, sew it up, rather than go downtown and buy a new one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Delisle, always for your insightful references. We remind our viewers that you can make your contact Zoom, Facebook, WhatsApp 776-0440. And remember to treat with the national poll on the SEA, available to both adults and children. So we want to take a break now, question and answer session.
Mommy?
Yes?
I'm scared.
It's okay. Just keep your mask on and wash your hands as often as possible. Remember how we practice? It will be fun to be back in school. You learn about healthy eating habits, play games to stay fit, and you can even get a nutritious breakfast and lunch at lunchtime.
And we will see you later when we meet with the school nurse to discuss healthy eating options.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
T, what's up?
I had a post day today.
You start drama today?
Nah, tomorrow. Today was visual arts.
My mom had to come into school this afternoon.
Your mom?
Yes, we had a workshop with our school nurse on healthcare and eating properly.
Oh yeah, mom and dad came in yesterday for a workshop on how to manage anxiety and stress.
I wonder if they could help us with the stress of this mask.
And the PA sister only reminding me, students wash all their hands.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
And we are back. And we are dealing with our questions now. And question from on Zoom for any of the panelists. Taking into consideration that the Trinidad and Tobago Constitution assures equal opportunity for all, what are some measures put in place to ensure that there is no discrimination, gender, race, etc., of competent teachers by known denominational secondary school boards? That doesn't sound like a question for all. It seems to address the school. Anybody want to jump on that?
I can attempt to answer the question. I'm not sure what they mean by discrimination. Each school board would have their criteria, and they would make their criteria very clear. And I believe one of the criteria would be certainly that they belong to the particular religion. You can't give what you don't have. So that you cannot impart, you cannot be part of a country. Apart from that, though, the other criteria are those of the Ministry of Education. And so all of the boards have to make sure the teachers meet those criteria. So I'm not sure about how else we would discriminate. Some people may feel they're discriminated against because they don't belong to that particular religion. But we can't discriminate against.
The next question is for Dr. Delisle. It came from on the Zoom platform. What changes are being considered to the present assessment paradigm at the primary level that remains centered on an SEA exam?
So there is and remember the details the report is more than 300 pages at this point in time. Assessment system is, and you can just Google that and see what a balanced assessment is. So you must have a way to monitor and know that targets are being reached from infants to standard 5. You can't wait till standard 5. So you need to have what we call national learning assessments. But you must, in the classroom, have formative assessment so people can learn and be surprised that some students who seem slow or difficult, once they get the feedback, they say, oh, that's to do it. Now, you know who know that? Sports people. Because they train people. And a fella, he said, no, trap the ball so and hit it so. And some people learn that quickly, but they never get feedback before. So you have to give kids feedback.
Do you think it will better serve the nation's good if the so-called prestige schools allow 20% of the students who score below average to benefit from the excellent programs and environments?
You know, the principals do not see the scores of the students when they're given the list by the Ministry of Education to select. And so depending on when a students may be high or lower, in a school that is very high on parents' choice lists, the students who may be presented, the names presented by the Ministry of Education may have fairly high marks. In many cases, the difference in marks is small. Right? But the principals really don't know. When we talk about success, though, I think we have to go back to what our philosophy is. To their full potential, we're looking to develop the child to be the best person that they can be. And that is a lot more than gaining a scholarship, maybe. You know, so when we talk success, we need to look beyond what the marks in CSEC or CAPE might be and look at how that child has developed.
Relationship between the denominational boards and the state be redefined in a transformed educational system.
Let me take a touch of that. Very interesting. That's one of the main goals. In fact, we are asking for that redefinition. We have societies that we could look at. One talks about non-state and state actors. So there are a series of principles that we must apply. Yes, there is also theory that we can apply. And of course, I hopefully wouldn't be there. But certainly in terms of mediation, in terms of lawyers, they would be able to bring things together. But I'm sure one of my colleagues will also have
speakers would have mentioned it in their presentation. I think we need to build more authentic and trusting relationships between the two parties, not superficial but sincere, where we take the good with the bad, but focus on the good and be the best version of what it means to nurture a child. And, between both parties, it must be a little more authentic than now.
Okay. Question for Ms. Mahesh Prasad and Mr. Maharaj. How can denominational schools and school leaders add more value to the system, and what are some strategies and approaches for better cooperation?
Okay, so then I could look at that. I think one of the things that we always talk about is best practice. So I will look at it from that angle. One of the things that in the denominational schools, the principals would have been exposed to, it's very vigorous being, in administration in a board school, because you're accountable to the Ministry of Education standards, you're accountable to the parents, you're accountable to your boards. Skills that could be considered best practice that could be shared. And I think there should be avenue for sharing best practice among administrators from board schools to the government schools and vice versa. So that is one way in which we could contribute. Many times you would find that the leaders in our denominational schools go on to at the executive level and school supervisors. So they also lend that expertise and value further up, as time goes along. I think the emphasis should be on sharing, that we as an education system should work collaboratively. Whatever skill sets we possess, we could share, and we could also learn from others as well too. And that's an ongoing thing.
Thank you, education. Ms. Mungro had pointed out, there seems to be the illusion that board schools get only students who have a particular ability. We do get students, of course, at the low end of the scale, if you want to say, at the low end of the academia. What does happen, of course, is the strategies that are implemented by teachers. I can give a case level. Particular boys who were not, their performance at SE were not all that great. But out of that class that came out, one of those boys is an attorney now. He's an attorney. So it just goes to show, because of the strategies, because of the efforts that were made by staff and a concerted effort, and this is how we add value to that. The board schools continue to add value by the efforts that are made by its teachers of the Ministry of Education. It's how serious that mandate is taken according to the leadership of the school and the vision and the mission of the school. And once that is there, there is definitely, and statistics will show that there is a great value added at the end of 5 years when they transcend from SEA into CSEC, and if not even at those things holistically, because remember, we don't have CVQ. We will be very grateful if it's given to us, but of tech walk along parts of moving from CXC or CSEC into university, and not students necessarily of high academia. Students who are average, students who are below average, because we get a mixture of all. We get a mixture of all. So I hope that sheds a little bit of light on how we add value-added education.
Yes, it does. It does. So we are going to ask the final question, and it says for any one of the panelists, what are the doctrine of the role of the denominational boards in education? And a heavy one. That's a heavy one.
Okay. I am very happy for that question, because I want to clear up a misconception. Again, I feel I'm saying that a lot, right? But the denominational schools allocated funds, and the funds are very clearly defined. It's a running course. These are calculated based on the student population in number of students, and the measure right now is at the 2000 standard value, right? So that is where it is being calculated. And there's an ancillary grant because, of course, we don't have MTS and we have to get our own security and janitorial staff and so on. There used to be a minor equipment grant, which we stopped getting. So I could say in the last year, we have not received, even though our children are out there doing labs, we have to cater for material that they need for practical subjects and all those things. One of the things that we do is manage with a minimum financial resources, and it's a miracle, and I think sometimes maybe it's taken for granted that we are managing to run schools with very limited financial resources, from central government to the school, and we have to find a basis. So I don't know if the question was asked about the understanding that we are allocated a huge amount of money. The reality is the exact opposite. And that has been something that is one of the biggest challenges for principals they are wizards at balancing budgets at denominational school. We are professional beggars because we rely on stakeholders. And so when they see us come in, they go like, oh gosh, what they come in to ask for now have. And we still manage to, ensure that our students are taken care of as far as those resources are concerned. So if they're asking in terms of whether it's going to be a financial issue for the state, I think no, we could teach people how to manage on very little financially. All right, thank you.
So, in terms of the funding, I want to make it clear that the traditional schools, it's 18%. Should never be said. But now this is this is 18% as a 18 minus 100 is how much? I can't work that out. It's what, 82, right? So you don't want a situation in which you focus just on one side and you forget the other side. Now, all countries, good performing systems in Latin America and use something called vertical equity, in which you actually support the schools that have the concentration of economic and social disadvantage. So when the government gets advice from wherever, they will tell them, because that's in the OECD, that's in UNESCO, that's in the World Bank. They have to put in a system for vertical equity. In other words, your schools that are struggling in the lower tier, they would need support for teaching and things like that. So changes will be made. It wouldn't come from us. It will come from economists in these wonderful bodies. But that is the clear theory, and nobody goes outside of that. So again, look at the entire system. Because if we're going anywhere, we must go together. We can't go and leave some people behind and say, hey, where he is? I can't see again. Whoa, you don't need nothing. I'm gone. Make sure you carry people with you.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to agree with Professor Delight. I think all schools need to be resourced adequately according to their context and their needs, and I fully agree with that sentiment.
All right. We have had a full question and answer segment. People should continue to, give their questions, continue to send in your questions and your comments. You have until June the 17th. So let's just take a quick break before we wrap up our consultation.
Mommy?
Yes?
I'm scared.
It's okay. Just keep your mask on and wash your hands as often as possible. Remember how we practice? It will be fun to be back in school. You learn about healthy eating habits, play games to stay fit, and you can even get a nutritious breakfast and lunch at lunchtime.
And we'll see you later when we meet with the school nurse to discuss healthy eating options.
The Ministry of Education is doing its part. Let's get our children back to school safely.
Yes, we have had a day, an evening that was very informative, very exciting. And I'm sure if we took all the questions, we would be here until maybe after midnight. So today we spoke about partnerships, very, very important for our education system. And we would now like to thank our panelists, Ms. Zina Ramatali, Ms. Shara Carrington James, Ms. Sharon Mangru, Imam Imtiaz Ali, Right Reverend Joy Abdul Mohan, Ms. Mahesh Pusad and Pundit Maraj, Professor Jerome Delisle, School of Education of the University of the West Indies, the UE Marketing Team, Ministry of Education, Corporate Communications Division, Song Production, Sign Language Team, Dr. Paulson Skerrett, and Eke Max. The job of the committee is not an easy one. These two topics of SE and Concordat are complex and require sensitive, insightful, and innovative approaches to ensure the best policy decisions possible for the improvement of the education system. So you can continue the conversation by email seaconsultation@moe.gov.tt, WhatsApp 776. Complete the national poll if you are able. And thank you again for taking the time to join us this evening. Again, I was your host for the evening, Kwesi Atiba, the PRO of the Islamic Resource Society. I thoroughly enjoyed what I was doing this evening. A very, very good panel. I want to thank all of you again personally. Yeah? The other thank was from, from the group, but this is a personal thank you for all who have participated as panelists and those who sent in their questions. So have a great night. Thank you. May Allah keep all of us safe, guide you back to your homes and to your program tomorrow. And people have to do all kinds of things to get back into the system that we have. Thank you very much.
Recording stopped.